March is Women's History Month, 31 days devoted to honoring women's contributions in American history. In this episode, we're highlighting a few badass ladies who've left their mark on the world, making it a better place for everyone. We'll also share a few resources to help educate yourself on more amazing women all month long.
Women face unique challenges, from glass ceilings at work to everyday personal stressors.
The Maiden Voyage podcast covers it all, offering tips and tricks for overcoming your struggles.
While this lady-hosted podcast focuses heavily on women's issues,
it's relevant for anyone who values self-improvement, equality, and badass inspiration.
We all navigate this journey together. Welcome aboard.
So we met for our prep meeting this week, right? And we were having this discussion of what's on our minds, what do we want to talk about? And I think we might have had our shortest prep meeting since I've been one of the mermaids, which was, hey, it's March, it's Women's History Month, so let's talk about some women. So that was kind of fun to have such a quick and agreeable topic. We're leaving it a little bit free form today. I learned while we were prepping for this call that the first Women's History Month effort was in 1981, which means Women's History Month is 40 years old this year. She's a grown up. She is ready to go. And I think we have a lot of cool stories to share. Jen, I know you had found a TED Talk about women's history. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that, and then we can link a resource to it for our listeners.
Yeah, yesterday I ended up rabbit holing for a little bit and watching some YouTube videos, because sometimes for me it's just easier to learn auditory. This TED Talk, this woman, I'll have to look up her name again. We'll definitely share the link. Her name was, I'm going to butcher her last name, Amelia Critchbaum. She had a very short talk, just for 6 minutes, but one thing that she said that I thought was really profound in her introduction was that in all of our American history books, only 10% of the history that we talk about involves women. So that stat just blew my mind, right? And you think back to when you're in high school or even college in your history class, and I had a revelation where I'm like, no shit, she's right. I don't remember learning about any women except maybe like 3, like Rosa Parks and stuff like that. So that actually kind of enraged me. I think that that's a problem because a lot of us don't even realize this. We go through our education and we just get all these history classes, and maybe it doesn't even cross our mind, even us as ladies. I don't know if when you ladies were of age, did you ever sit there in your history class and think, damn, there's no freaking boobs in this?
So I think I'm incredibly fortunate that in college, I was a hippie-dippy anthropology major, right? And I was also a minor in art history, and I took a lot of courses that were around and about social topics, right? Okay. So I had a course one summer on like intersectional feminism and things like that. So my worldview changed a lot at that point in time, right? Because I had a lot of really smart professors and grad students pointing out things about women's role in the human experience, basically. So you don't learn about it in high school. It's not standard like curriculum for the most part. And I do think that sometimes the issue of having a month like Women's History Month or a specific month honoring a culture or group of people is that it says, oh, this is the time when we talk about this versus all the time. But I also understand that by setting aside a specific time, it helps it become part of the conversation all the time. Yeah. But it's definitely a challenge, right? It's sad that if half of the people in the world are women, by the way, more than half of the old people in the US, very elderly, are women. Why aren't we talking about them more? Yeah. Right. Can't possibly imagine that we haven't done a thing or two.
So something that it always sticks out to me, like that quote, I'm sure you guys know it, well-behaved women rarely make history. Oh, yeah. I feel like if you kind of reel it back and think about what like in society, like what are the typical gender roles have been, is for women to be feminine and quiet and well-behaved and polite and all these things. And it's like, there are these women that just said like, F that, not doing that. And they like literally made the history books. But I think it's just like, we're now growing out of like those gender norms.
Yeah.
And we are just like, we're all just being whatever people we want to be. And like, that's really cool. So I love that Women's History Month is a thing. I can't believe it's only 40 years old, but also I really can believe it at the same time.
Yeah, wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
But-
a big thing back in the day too, you hit the nail on the head there, Carissa, is that it just wasn't acceptable. It wasn't that women weren't making history, it just wasn't publicized, if that makes sense. I was reading that article that you had stuck in there about women inventors, and scrolling through there, I was seeing there was a trend where there were women who actually invented things years before men actually submitted for a patent for something and got approved. And like the prime case was Monopoly. There was a woman named Elizabeth Maggie who created essentially what was Monopoly, but called it the landlord's game. And then 30 years later, some dude got it patented and got all the credit for Monopoly, but she was the one that made it.
Also, this one's totally for Julie. Like, it was a woman that invented the coffee filter in 1908.
I saw that.
Like, you know, like,
Bless, on behalf of women, you're welcome.
yeah, like the list of women inventors, I noticed there was so much that was happening in the 1800s.
Yeah.
It was nuts. Like the 1800s, I don't even know. Like, and some of these things I never would have, I think in modern times, sometimes we don't think, like, I have a remote here on my desk, right? Like somebody had to invent that. Before that, I needed to go and like push the button on the TV. There was not a remote. And before that, like, hell, there wasn't a freaking TV. But like, you know what I mean? It's just, I think sometimes in like all the modern day stuff, we like really don't think about every single thing we're using. Mason jar full of water. Someone had to invent the mason jar. I don't know. Like now I'm just thinking about it. I love, that's the conversation I loved in school, was about inventions and how women played a part in like the everyday things. Also, a woman made the ice cream maker. I also just want to point that out too.
I was excited when I saw that.
They're important things. These are
And the
important
freaking
things.
fridge, our electric refrigerator, Florence, we have to thank. Thanks.
I mean,
Florence.
they're very practical.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me that many of these either have gone under the radar or are so old that a man also invented them after the fact. Considering, I don't know, I would say definitely before women's suffrage, we weren't people. So it's hard to file your own patent when you're not a person.
Yeah.
Right? It's only in recent history in many cultures that women are people, not property. And we're fortunate that today we are people, because in some places we're still not.
Yeah.
Sorry, fam.
Welcome, Jackie. We saw you hop up.
Hi, ladies. I have very mixed feelings about Women's History Month.
Tell us.
Oh, I already shared some mixed feelings. I'd love to hear yours.
Well, what? Like, okay, you're not going to
Slide
give
on
me
in,
a
girl.
TLDR.
No.
I mean, okay, so obviously women rock, goes without saying. Like, I am very strong feminism and all of that, like awesome stuff, like raising my daughter to be independent and confident, and you can do anything a man can do, et cetera, et cetera. Although I don't use that phrase, I say you can do whatever you want. Doesn't matter who does it first, you can do whatever you want. But like, it sucks that we still have to celebrate this month. Why are we not beyond this? Like, I think it's amazing that we reflect on the suffragettes. To me, like watching Mary Poppins as a child, the mom really struck a chord with me. She was a suffragette. And in the opening scenes of Mary Poppins, she comes home and says to her housekeepers, quick, hide this. because she's wearing her women can vote sash and her whole garb. She doesn't want her husband to see it. It's like in the first 5 minutes of Mary Poppins. And the mom always stuck with me in that film because I find her to be like this like really forward thinking, independent woman who back in that time, like was hiding these things from her husband and other men surrounding her because they didn't want to hear the jibber jabber, you know? But the fact that like, and the women's suffragist movement, voting to me has always felt like such a pride moment. Like I vote anytime I can because I had ancestors who could not, right? Like, as you said, like, it's so important for us to reflect and like, know and understand like where we've come from, right? And like, and I think honoring that space is amazing, but also we're still paid less and we still face sexism and at work and in the world at large. And I just hate that we have to do this still, I guess is what it is. And it almost reminds me this time every year that like, we used to be like subpar human beings and we kind of still are.
Yeah.
So I think Jackie, we're kind of in the same area of thought around it. Like, it sucks, but we need it.
Yeah.
Right.
But that
because
sucks,
if we
you know,
didn't,
like,
right. But if we didn't have the annual reminder at this point,
where
when would
we
we
be?
have the reminder?
Sure.
Right.
And
Right.
you know, history repeats
Sometimes-
itself unless we learn from it.
Right. And sometimes you need to force it a little bit. And that's what any like
Just like with Black
observational month
History Month.
does.
Like,
Right.
we should
Right.
just know Black history. We don't have
Yeah.
White History Month.
Right.
Less.
It's still super important, and it's great that it's
It
there.
is. And it's great that like the spin that like, again, I come from a vein having a young child, but like Nick Jr., we watch a lot of Nick Jr. up in our house, does these amazing things to celebrate for young minds, Black History Month. And they have like different kinds of music and little kids of the culture, whatever, like different, you know, Black cultures, like talking about their history or their foods or their clothing. So like she's getting access to some really cool things that at her age at 4, she's not getting at preschool. She'll get it like in her curriculum as she grows, but it, you know, it's giving her access to all of this at such a young age, I think is awesome. And they do the same thing for Women's History Month. They like little bubble guppies will like share something interesting, and she's like digesting this information because it's being shared by cartoons that she watches, or like children of her age talking about, my mommy wears this amazing dress and this is why, and like, and I think that's awesome. But then I don't know, it just like breaks my heart that she has to learn it that way, and it's just not what it is. It's like it is what it is. It should just be elevated and better.
It should be, but we have a long history as humans of not doing it, right? And we live in a time where progress happens so quickly.
Yeah.
Right?
So
like, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, like think about technology and how different it was. So we have these expectations that progress happens quickly.
Agreed.
But it doesn't always, right? So
well, and March being Women's History Month didn't actually become a national thing until the 90s.
Yeah, like the first kind of push, we talked about this, was 1981. So like she's 40. But that's right, I did not share. We were not official until the 90s.
Yeah, the president
which is
issued
like
a proclamation declaring March Women's History Month in 95.
In summary, women's history. But even think about hundreds and thousands of years of women's history before our current historical memory, right? The last 100 years.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot there. So the fact that we've gone from like becoming people, being able to vote, being able to have credit cards and do things on our own and get paid for our work and start closing the gender wage gap, although we're not there yet, right? Progress takes time, and it hasn't been that much time when you really zoom out.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right.
It's challenging, and there's a lot against it, right? You can say well, every employer should just look at how much money every woman makes and say, how much does the man sitting next to her make? They should make exactly the same. But there are other loaded pieces of those two people's experiences
Well,
that may be working against that and may not be intentional by either party.
That's an
Right,
interesting statement, though. So I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you feel like a man or a human, let's just gender, like a human deserves to make as much as next to the human next to them at work if they don't have the same level of experience? Or like, I think that I don't want to just make as much of a man because like I'm a woman and I should make as much as a man. I want to make what I deserve based on my experience, my expertise, and what I'm bringing to the dynamic opportunity at that place of employment. And if that means I make more than you, then that's what it is. And if that means I make less than you, then that's what it is too. Like, I don't believe in that we should make the same amount because it is equal. No, you should get paid for what you're worth in the effort that you're bringing to that organization, not based on your gender.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think there are some components of our experience leading up to our careers that change where we might end up when we start our careers.
Yeah.
Right. So for example, what you make, there are a lot of studies that show that your salary or your income, your first job out of college really dictates your lifetime earning potential. And we know that culturally, men are more likely to negotiate their salary than women.
Yeah.
Right. So if I am starting an entry-level job, I have the same GPA as a guy I graduate with. We get a job at the same company. We're going to have the same boss. It's the same job title. And he negotiates, but I don't because I'm like, yeah, that sounds good to me. Right. Then when he gets a raise and I get a raise and we get an equivalent percentage raise in 3 years, he's still going to be making more than me. And that's because as a woman, I'm not culturally always built up in a way that like, yeah, you should negotiate and you should go after what you want and those things. And that has nothing to do with the employer. Right? It really doesn't. It just has to do with this foundation of how women and men behave differently. So there are small things like that. And then there are bigger things like if Jackie, you have a master's degree, but let's say you didn't right now and you're working, you have Abby, that you are default caregiver. We'll say a lot of moms are default caregiver, right? Like it happens. Someone always is. And your husband and you are both like, both of us want to go back to school right now. Right? We both want to do this. Is there a likelihood that your husband may be able to do that before you are? And then does that change his career path? Now that's like a dynamic, obviously, that you and your husband would navigate in all of those things. Right. But for many people, it becomes easy. I'm using you as an example, not you.
But I would really say I love that example. I would say in the greater scheme of things, like not personally in my home, because Brad will never go back to school. He's a oneer and a doneer. I think that a man this is going to be my perception. Okay. I think a man would enroll in school and not think about the consequences of those around him, where a father would maybe do that. A mother would enroll in school and plan for, I'm going to need someone to help me with X, Y, and Z as like unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, however you want to look at it, as like the default parent. You have to make things happen, right? Like who's making the breakfast? I'm going to wake up 3 hours early to get my schoolwork done. And not all dads think that way. That's how, if it would ever work, it would have to work that way.
Right. But then that changes, again, can feed back into your career. What if you're both teachers? What if you're both teachers and getting a master's degree or doing graduate school credits, increase your income? Mm-hmm. Bing, bang, boom, down the line. Well, maybe one of you can become an administrator and one of you is still working on those credits to get there. So things like that aren't necessarily directly like we're going to pay women less. I think very few employers actually do that today, but create this wage gap. And that's where we have to work from. I think it's very optimistic to be like, oh, this will be dealt with in 5 years, right? I think in 100 years.
It just depends on, I think how some of it really depends on how the dynamic of parenting between like couples continues to grow and change and evolve, because that's why like women have the child more, like usually, and unless you're, adopting, of course, but it's like they're expected to be at home. They have maternity leave. They have to take care of that child in like their first couple of months of life. And the man like or their partner like doesn't necessarily have to be there. It's like someone's single priority usually to take care of a child. They are away from work. And when they come back to work, like sometimes it happens where your original job position has been filled in by somebody else. It's not that you were fired, it's not that you were let go, but you are moved around. And sometimes the trajectory of whatever trajectory you were on career-wise changes for having a child. I've watched it happen, and it's kind of sad.
I think their priorities change too sometimes. Like that mother just becomes so infatuated with, there's more to life than this desk. I have this person who means the world to me now. And then that changes, but nonetheless, it still does affect like the pay gap and all those things too. It's
yeah. I don't know. I always think about that a lot.
Yeah, we have like a fun role here in the world.
Yeah.
Just to do all the things. But to me, right, it's okay to change your priorities. It's okay to say, I could go and get a job where they expect me to work 80 hours a week, and whether you have a kid or not, right? Like that's my life, right? Like, Jackie, I don't have a child, but I'm going to use you as an example for this again. You could be like, Brian, I'm taking this job. Figure out the kid, right? You could go work 80 hours and do that. Theoretically, you are a free-willed person, you can. But that might not be your priority, and that's okay too. Right? Like, that's not my priority. I don't want to do that. And I don't have a kid. I got myself.
Right. I think this is a very loaded conversation. And I think that if I've never met someone, and there are women out there who like pop out a baby and get right back to their executive office in 4 weeks and are like slaying the game. And like, you go, girl.
Good for them. That's terrifying.
Right? You go, girl. There are also women who have a baby and 2 weeks later have to go back to work. Yeah. So don't get me started there. Like, men earmuffs, you're legitimately still bleeding from your labor 2 weeks later, but they have to go back to work, right? That's disgusting. And so sad. But then there are women, I think like me, who definitely alter their career trajectory on purpose because something else comes first. When I took this job, it was very clear to Remington what my main priority was. And the job I had before this, I took because I didn't really want to work yet, but I had to start making money. It was like not the best job, but you know what? It gave me a lot of flexibility and I got paid. And then when I was ready to re-engage more in a mental conversation, I said, okay, I'm going to find a job that suits me now, right? And I think that like, that's okay to like take a step backwards, like we've seen happen in history, where we take maybe a little step backwards to like get our gumption back together and put our big girl pants on and like be like, I'm now ready to recommit to me and like to my mind and to my, I need to make more money for my family and I'm re-entering the workforce. And this job I have currently is definitely harder and keeps me closer to my desk than a job I had when she was an infant, right? And so, but I made that choice to like pull back out of my career a little bit because it made the most sense for like me and my family. And I was blessed to be able to make that decision, and not everybody is.
Yeah, I hope what I said did not come out the wrong way. Like,
oh no, not at all. No,
okay.
Not at all. It was very accurate. It was very accurate that like some women pull back and some push forward, right? Well, I said I'm never going to be a stay-at-home mom. And here they are 3 kids later, stay-at-home mom, because that's what they found joy in. Like, that's not for me, but it is for them, you know? And like, I think, you know, we've come to a place in society where we are if you're lucky enough to make those decisions, you can.
Yeah.
But we're still also in a place where maternity leave isn't universal or even national, where and I wish this was more addressed in Women's History Month, because we're asked to be the bearer of so many important things, especially during COVID. All women, not just women with children, right? Like carrying on a household, or, you know, moving forward, expected to date and find your person. All these things you're supposed to keep doing right now, but nobody's giving an inch.
Yeah.
You know, and it's
That's the main point I was making, is that sometimes it just doesn't feel like a choice for anybody. Like sometimes you have a choice and sometimes you don't. And like, I feel like that's the problem, right? It should be whatever you want to do, like whatever you want to do. And sometimes I've just watched that not happen for people. And that's sad.
Thankfully, legally, we're allowed to make choices now, right? Yay.
We are. So we did promise in this episode, we'd share a little bit about some wonderful women who rock the world. Does anyone have a feature they want to start with?
I mean, can we start with the main feature of 2020/20, the first female vice president? Come on. Like,
Heck yeah.
Grown ass women and young girls alike, like, stand proud, ladies. Glass ceiling officially broken. I think that is, I am so honored to have lived to see this happen. I mean, like, I cried. It was incredible that the young minds of our country, both boys and girls, get to see a woman of color, of multi-nationalities, stand proudly in that office. And it gives me goosebumps when I think about it. I love it.
Okay. Did you, Jackie, did you watch the inauguration with your daughter?
So I was working during the inauguration, and I had it on. She was home. And I had it on in the other room. And I actually have a picture that like brings my family to tears. She kept hearing the Pomp and Circumstance playing and was like, we talked about what was going to happen. And she like, oh, mommy, it's Joe Biden. And she had trouble saying Kamala's name, but like we were working on it. She was like, they were talking about it at school. Like she was so jacked up about it. And I have a picture of her standing in front of the TV with the glare on her face and her hands behind her back, just like proudly watching. I don't think she obviously understood the weight of the moment, but she was so excited that it was happening. And so she watched kind of by herself with like us in the background. And it was just so really, really cool.
That gave me
I'll share the picture with you guys. It's like a little blurry because I had to zoom in because I was like across the house. But she like, I think all the kids I know got really hyped about it. It was just very much talked about in school too.
Yeah. I remember when I was little elementary school, like elections were a very big thing. And I'm grateful for that, because there are a whole lot of folks out there who don't realize how important being an active part of like government is. And that for most of us, that's going to be voting, right? Most of us aren't going to be mayors and governors and presidents, maybe school board members and things like that, you know, getting started. But it's so important. So anytime I hear about kids having that involvement, it's really fun. She'll probably be president though, Jackie.
She'll be president of something. She thinks she's president of this house. I gotta crack her down a few notches.
I mean, is she though?
I mean, her and Sailor.
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say my dog's the president of my house and she can't talk or hear. So really, this is where we're at. Tune in next week when I have a couch that my dog will be joining me on.
Yes. So did you ladies have any moments? I mean, I feel like I stole the stunner, but I'd love to hear what you feel like, any ladies or situations that you wanted to share that were monumental to you.
So I want to share a little bit about a woman I didn't know about before this week, but who has recently passed. She was a Japanese artist. Her name is Toko Shinoda. And she died at 107 years old. She would have been 108 this month, which is in and of itself amazing. But she was an abstract expressionist who had quite a career, quite a life. And she combined abstract expressionism of, post-war mid-century big movement in art history, one of my very most favorites, with more traditional Japanese calligraphy. It's a great time to Google her because there are a lot of articles that have been running, but really like breathtaking, wonderful work to look at, especially if you like modern art and post-war art. Really something worth absorbing. And I think in art, as in so many spaces, women's place is always contested. And that's really our role in the world, right? To be occupying contested space. So it's always interesting to see and read more. And I don't have a huge share about her. I think just anytime you talk about a visual artist, the best thing to do is just go and look at work. But tremendous career. I think I read her last gallery show was in 2019, so she would have been 105 or 106 because her birthday's in March. So I can only hope that I am doing so well in my hundreds. Right?
Wow.
Dang. When we tell the men we'll outlive them, that's really the example. Not only will I outlive you, my career will be double yours. Sorry, what was that? Where did that come from?
All the women in my family end up outliving their husbands by about 20, 25 years.
Normal.
Yeah. I didn't know that was like such an
I mean, like, you're not already planning your Golden Girl phase, because I am.
I haven't really thought about it. I don't know.
Oh yeah, my friends and I are already talking about where we're buying a house after our husbands die.
Oh my God.
This is
It's
normal.
bound to happen. You know what I mean? Like,
Statistically, yeah.
Wow.
Except, okay, so I don't know where I will stack up on this.
I'm so sorry to say, Julie, but I think you're going to lose.
I could, but he's a medical mystery.
Yes.
So my partner is Korean, and their average life expectancy exceeds Americans. However, he was raised in America.
Right. So he's got
and
all
is
the
a medical
hearty
mystery.
American food in him.
Right. Yeah, did him dirty.
About the food.
So we always debate this. Actually, we will openly and actively debate this, but I have the future will tell. The future will tell. But I'm still planning my Golden Girls years, whether he's invited or not.
Yeah, my husband's
I'll be
already
there.
told me, he's like, I'm gonna die when I'm like 60. So like live your life, you know? I'm like, why would you say that?
I like it. I mean, I don't like it, but listen, we're all gonna die.
Yeah. I guess you just gotta enjoy every day, right?
Oh yeah.
What about, okay, anybody have any favorite female authors? Because like sometimes I get a little obsessed with looking at some of the great works that came from women.
I don't know how to read.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's where I'm at these days.
Okay, cool.
Well, that article that you sent, Carissa, that we could totally share on our social media for our listeners about some famous authors looked really exciting to me. I mean, there are a lot of those stereotypical ones, right? That the classics that you might have read in school, like I'm looking at it now, like Little Women, To Kill a Mockingbird, Pride and Prejudice, stuff like that. But was the book that you were going to mention or the author you were going to mention, Carissa, on this list?
Yeah, I guess there was just some books that I knew that I definitely grew up reading that I just didn't realize were women. And I feel like that's also just a weird thing. I think I read books without really knowing like who the authors were. And whenever you kind of look back, like, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird, I didn't know that Anne of Green Gables, written by Lucy Maud Montgomery, like I had no idea. Like it's just all these amazing classics that I know I have read at some point in time that were written by women, and that I don't have any like specific, I think there are a couple of specific examples that I can't remember right now, but
I was totally a Judy Bloomer growing up.
Yeah.
Judy Bloom's great.
Yeah. But it's like some women used to pen under a man's name in order to get published. You guys know that. Yeah. Like, what?
Yeah, it blows my mind.
It blows my mind.
But their passion was still there. I mean, and all the inventors and the writers that we're talking about, they were still doing it. There was that itch, that desire to
I
do this, to
know,
get the
which I
recognition.
love.
They just
Yeah,
like,
like I mean, yeah, like it's a bummer, but at the same time, like super proud of them. Like they just did the damn thing anyway. Like I'm gonna write this and then I'm gonna submit it to the publisher with like my brother's name or something, and we're just gonna publish it and call it a day. Like that's awesome.
that like self-satisfaction, I guess.
Yeah.
You have that
Well, I
little-
think it comes also down to like hustle out of necessity and hustle out of desire. And that just shines, I think, in all of the women that we've talked about so far, us included, that like there's always been this innate sense of wanting and doing more, you know, and having to like fight through that over decades and decades and decades. Like we all grew up learning about Women's History Month and these magical females who have, you know, against all odds, you know, overcome challenges and all these terrible things. And yes, they had to publish under their husband or brother's name and, you know, had to do these awful things to get where they are in our history books. But it's hustle, man. It's grit.
Grit. I love that word.
It's funny.
Wow.
The woman that I was going to talk about, we all know Miss Amelia Earhart. But it's one of those things where back in like the early 1900s and like the 30s and stuff, when she was a big pilot, it wasn't really, she was looked down upon as a woman who was flying, and men didn't believe in her. And she went on all these insane journeys, broke all these records, you know, the first solo woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. And it just breaks my heart that I feel like she had such this passion that she pushed herself beyond maybe the limit because she wanted to prove herself. And that's why she went on this journey to be the first person to fly from the Red Sea to India. And that was her notable trip where she never came back, was supposedly like lost at sea. One of the great mysteries of modern time. They never recovered her body. They found parts of the plane, but that was it. It breaks my heart that some women felt like they had to do things alone because they didn't have other people standing behind them. She went out on this brave journey, like metaphorically and physically, and didn't make it back. So I just wanted to mention her because I think the symbolism behind that is really profound. Were you going to mention an author, Carissa, before I kind of derailed?
I think her name is hold on. It's a series of books that I like a lot. It's Gillian Flynn.
Oh yeah, I love Gillian Flynn.
Wrote Gone Girl. That is Gone Girl is my favorite book. Gone Girl is like my favorite book. Like
that tells us a lot about you, so we can dive into that in another episode.
No, I just like I love page turners, but I just
It was
feel
a thriller, yeah.
I just feel like her writing just it captivates me like every time.
Agree.
That's
And I love
good reads for this year. I'm excited. I just read that Girl on a Train.
Oh yeah,
that was good
another
too.
great one. Oh my gosh.
That movie was good too.
They actually did a great job with the movie. The Gone Girl movie, it was good, but it was just didn't meet.
I don't know, Neil Patrick Harris. He did something amazing in that film.
I have to watch it. Well, I'm gonna wait.
Patrick Harris is amazing.
Brian and I, after seeing that movie together, he was like, "Do you have a journal?" I'm like, you'll never know.
You'll never know. I remember describing the basis of that book to my husband. He's like, "Are you reading that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, cool."
Taking notes, bro. I'm not even reading it. I'm taking notes. Yeah, she's a fantastic author.
Yeah. What about you, Julie? Any like I know you said you don't read, but like anything you listen to, like any female podcasters even that I know you listen to podcasts sometimes.
Well, none of them are business podcasts that I listen to by women.
Meg's pregnant.
What?
The girl on Instagram, the trainer girl. Is her name Meg?
Oh, yeah.
Meg Squats?
Yes.
Yeah, she's real pregnant.
Oh my God, she's amazing though. She's
I know.
I watch her and I'm like, I don't want to do what you're doing, and I am not pregnant.
Yeah, no, Meg Swats is amazing. She is a power lifter. She also runs her mission is to get a barbell in every woman's hands, which is fantastic. Right? She runs Stronger by the Day, which is a training program. She also does nutrition courses that are very so she doesn't really subscribe to any single notion about nutrition other than it's okay to eat in a goal-oriented way, and everyone has a different goal.
I love that.
Right? So it's not all intuitive eating. It's not all counting macros. It's not all of anything. So she's a good one to follow if you're in the fitness or nutrition space. And she is real pregnant, which is fantastic. I know, I was so happy for her. It was like the third happiest I've been about someone's life event this year, I think. Oh yeah, no, I have my top 3 and I only know one of them. So that's really, really fascinating. But yeah, she's fantastic. I think there are a lot of great podcasts. There's a lot of great content out in the world. And when I look at digital content, I think there is more, at least in this space where I operate online, there's a lot more equality in terms of the ability for a woman to get their message heard. Now, the reaction to that message is where things are probably less equal. But we're lucky in that way that we can spread messages online and we can reach audiences that before, if you had 100,000 people who thought the same way but lived across the country, they'd probably never know about each other. And now they know about each other in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So love that. Here for that. Here for an influencer here and there. Not gonna lie. Sell me those Built Bars. I'll buy them. Meg Swats does not sell the Built Bars. Just for the record, she has her own nutrition brand as well.
Oh, I bet you she does.
She has her own supplement brand.
Wow.
It's called Buff Chick Subs.
Oh, you've sent me a link to that.
Yeah, they're very like clean ingredient, nothing crazy in them type of things. So she's Gucci.
This is not sponsored by Meg Swats.
Not sponsored by Meg Swats, although Meg Swats, if you ever want to be on the podcast, we are.
Want to sponsor us and come on our podcast, Meg Swats?
She doesn't even need to sponsor us. We'll just fangirl for a while.
Right, we're not obsessed with you. It's fine.
I'm obsessed. Hello, I'm obsessed with you. It's fine. Everything's fine.
I think this was so great. I loved that this is going to sound bad, but I love that this forced me, but gave me a reason to just dig a little bit more into like Women's History Month. Like I was talking to Jen offline earlier this week and I was like, why is March even, who picked March as Women's History Month? So it gave me an opportunity to like rabbit hole a little bit and read some articles and, dive into the reasons behind Women's History Month and learn some really cool things. So I'm glad you ladies picked this topic.
Let's go.
I feel like it was Julie's idea.
Yeah. And I just think you should encourage everyone to like take 5 minutes out of your day this month and like read an article about someone you didn't know about and educate yourself on, maybe something that could influence you or the people around you in the future.
And Chris, I found a great article that we could share on Facebook too, that it's like things to watch in March. And
yes, I love that.
Educational resources. And I showed my one girlfriend offline. I'm like, I'm going to just pick 5 things from this list and tell myself like, I'm going to just take a night and watch like an hour of the history documentary on something and educate myself. Because
didn't you say, Krista, there's something on PBS?
Yeah, it was like a string of videos on PBS or something like that about different women in
and they're
history.
like right there in the article. Like there's a YouTube video
Yeah.
that's like an hour and a half documentary or something. So it's not like you have to search for it.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm going to also do this. Thank you.
Because I think that's what's super important because I didn't know those resources existed. And it's like if you don't know, like just look, like just research, just do your best, like learn. Because I honestly did not know it was Women's History Month until it showed up on my calendar on March 1st. I didn't. I had no idea.
I didn't either.
So just pay attention, be perceptive of the world around you, and be a badass. We're women. Everybody's allowed to be a badass, period.
Cheers to that.
Big
The end. The end.
Sadly, that'll do it for this week's episode of Maiden Voyage. We'd like to thank you, our amazing listeners, because let's face it, lady life is hard. It's incredible how much we accomplish every day, and we all deserve awards just for existing. If you're watching the show, make sure that you subscribe, click on that thing for instant notifications, speak your mind in the comments, and share us with your fellow Voyagers.